Call is now being recorded.
Yeah.
Beautiful sound. Beautiful.
Music to our ears.
BloodStream is a Belief original.
A 360-degree look
at the bleeding disorders community.
The developments, the history,
the news,
and the people who shaped our world.
BloodStream is brought to you by
the National Hemophilia Foundation
and created by Believe Limited.
Happy listening.
Hello and welcome to BloodStream, Episode 8, January 16th, 2017. I am Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm Natalie DeLullo.
On this episode, we'll review some recent headlines of interest during trending topics, introduce a patient perspective on life with sickle cell disease, and discuss Believe Limited's upcoming documentary about hemophiliac mountaineer Chris Bombardier's summiting of Mount Everest during our Like, Share, Comment segment. And to get this new year, new you started off with some solid financial advice, we'll hear from NFL Super Bowl champion turned financial coach Josh Gordy on the top 5 things everyone should be doing to manage their financial life. Some really solid tips in there. All that and more coming up on this episode. Welcome to BloodStream. All right. Hey, Natalie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm very happy to be back.
You want to tell the listeners what you experienced for the first time yesterday?
Yesterday was my first HTC visit.
Woo, Natalie! What'd you think?
I thought it was an incredibly informative day and also an incredibly long day.
That's very fair. So I went to an HTC yesterday for the first time in a few years, not for any particular reason other than just insurance and transition and moving states, and it was time to kind of get back into the fold. So I had my first annual comp visit yesterday, and Natalie joined me on that. So what would you say would be your number one takeaway from the visit?
Just how long the day is.
That seems very fair. That's how people know that you were actually there. That's a very honest answer. And from like an education standpoint, what would you say was your biggest takeaway?
Well, it was pretty cool. You had an ultrasound of your ankle yesterday, and it was exciting to watch the ultrasound and have the PT go over what it should look like, what it does look like, and the differences there. It was just really cool. I felt like I was back in school, back in clinicals and looking at pictures from medical textbooks. It was interesting.
Yeah, and it was nice to be able to actually see that stuff too from a patient perspective of, okay, so that's what's actually going on in my ankles, and here are some things that we should consider in terms of next steps. The kind of specialized treatment care and attention that I did not have success with finding outside of the expert HTC network. So it was really nice to come home, in a sense, to my medical care, and I'm glad that you got to come along for that.
Yeah, it was cool to go as an advocate. I felt like my role, like having the notebook and writing down things and being able to remind you to ask questions that during a long day especially, you forget what you went in for.
It's true. It's really helpful to have somebody there in the room with you, and I appreciate you playing that role. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I teased at the end of last year that 2017 we were going to have a couple of exciting developments with BloodStream, and I can talk about one of those right now, and that is that by the end of this month, January 30th, the BloodStream Now network of podcasts will be releasing a second podcast, and that is our Ask the Expert podcast series. And that series, the name kind of tells you what it's all about. It's conversations between myself and an expert in our community, a medical or healthcare expert. And speaking of HTCs, that medical expert will often come from the HTC network. I think we'll often go to hematologists or nurses, PT, social workers. It'll depend a little bit on the kind of questions that we get from you all, the listeners. And I can also see us engaging with insurance experts because I know that many people have insurance questions, struggles, concerns that they'd like an opportunity to voice or ask about, and I want to be able to facilitate that as well. So if you have questions that you would like to submit for our Ask the Expert series, you can contact us in one of 3 ways. You can find us on either Facebook at facebook.com/BloodStreamPod, on Twitter at BloodStreamInfo, or you can email mailbag@bloodstreampod.com. That's mailbag@bloodstreampod.com. And let us know what your question is. You are welcome to be anonymous in that. So obviously you're going to email BloodStream, but we can keep you anonymous on the podcast, and we can keep the question anonymous to the expert. Or we can identify you by first name and where you're coming from, what state, or if you're out of the U.S., what country. Entirely up to you, but let us know what questions you have. We are looking to get questions for episode 1 of that series in by the 19th, so that's just a few days away from now. January 19th. So if you do have a question, submit it sooner than not. And if you are hearing this after the 19th, or if you want to submit something but you're not ready yet, that's fine too. You can submit questions anytime. We're looking to do one of these Ask the Expert podcasts every single month. So I hope that's something you find useful and valuable. And if so, feel free to let us know. That kind of feedback always helps. You can leave us a review on iTunes. That always helps as well. Helps other people find the podcast. Or you can use any one of those social outlets to just say, hey, appreciate the Ask the Expert series of podcasts. But don't do it now. It's not out yet. Wait till it comes out. Make sure it's good. Then you can tell me if you like it or not. Okay, I think that about does it for that. Let's get on to trending topics. Looking for a new way to learn about hemophilia, von Willebrand disease, or just life with a bleeding disorder? Look no further. Stop the Bleeding is an award-winning comedic web series about bleeding disorders, centered around a dysfunctional nonprofit organization that serves the bleeding disorders community. Styled after the hit British and American sitcom The Office, the show uses humor and narrative storytelling to educate and empower people affected by bleeding disorders on topics such as advocacy, self-care, health and wellness, and much more. You can find all 29 episodes of the show on Believe Limited's YouTube channel by going to the Stop the Bleeding Facebook page or by visiting stbhemo.com. That's S for stapler, T for taxidermy, and B for bibliography. Visit stbhemo.com today. Because hey, it's okay to laugh while you learn. And now for trending topics. There are 3 upcoming national events with open registration that Natalie and I want to alert everyone to. The first is that registration is now open for the Hemophilia Federation of America's annual symposium, which is taking place this year, April 6th through the 9th in Providence, Rhode Island. According to HFA, Symposium is a community-centered educational event that draws hundreds of members from the bleeding disorders community together to share information, learn from one another about new advancements, and build a network of support. And while there is travel and registration costs associated with attending an HFA, each year they offer travel scholarships to first-time attendees who need financial assistance.
Ooh, Providence, Rhode Island in the spring should be motivation enough to attend.
Yeah, it's pretty enticing, isn't it?
Registration is also now open for National Hemophilia Foundation's annual meeting, taking place this year, August 25th and 26th in Chicago, Illinois. According to NHF, annual meeting is a time for people with bleeding disorders, chapter leaders, volunteers, healthcare providers, and industry partners to all gather under one roof to share information, encourage one another, and promote health and well-being of the bleeding disorders community at large. Attendees look forward to dozens of educational sessions, workshops, networking opportunities, and an exhibit hall full of interactive displays. NHF is offering connections for learning grants to eligible community members who apply for the grants by February 3rd. That's coming up, the February 3rd deadline. Links with more information can be found in the program notes.
And to keep our theme consistent here, I'd say if Providence, Rhode Island in the spring is enticing, Chicago, Illinois in August ain't too shabby either.
It's, a time to swim in the lake and enjoy the Midwest.
Good point, too. The February 3rd deadline for those interested in the Connections for Learning grants that are eligible for people going to NHF annual meeting, that's coming up quick. So again, do check out the program notes for links to that and information on the meeting itself, as well as information on Symposium and their associated grants and financial assistance opportunities. Last national thing I want to alert you to is the one that's actually coming up the quickest, and that is Washington Days, the NHF-hosted annual advocacy event during which hundreds of patient consumers from all around the country head to Capitol Hill to meet with congressmen and women in Washington, D.C. in order to advocate for the rights of the bleeding disorders community and often other rare and chronic diseases as well. So if you're someone who, like me, is particularly concerned about the future of healthcare in the U.S. following last year's election, I would consider prioritizing attending Washington Days. And it's taking place this year between March 8th and March 10th, again in Washington, D.C., and you can find links in the program notes for registration and other information.
This year more than ever, it feels important to get involved in politics, Patrick.
Yeah, I would agree. And, Washington Days isn't the be-all, end-all either. There's ways you can get involved on a local level. There's things you can do right from your own home. We've talked about it before on BloodStream, and we'll talk more about that toward the end of this trending topics segment. And now for the rest of our trending topics for January. The FDA recently announced a recall from Nurse Assist Inc. of, and this is the product name, Normal Saline Flush, which are 12 milliliter IV syringes with a 3, 5, or 10 milliliter fill volume. And the recall is due to a possible bloodstream infection that may be caused. And this is a class 1 recall, which is the most serious of recalls. So if you believe you're using this product or think you know someone who is, Do make them aware of this recall. There is more information on it and what to do next in the links included within the program notes.
The new year is a popular time for people to make decisions about health changes to their lifestyle. With that in mind, NHF recently reshared their exercise and activity options page from their Steps for Living program. The page features some of the best exercises for people with bleeding disorders, as well as links to related articles on exercise, activity, and nutrition.
Yeah, and I'll go a step further too and just say Steps for Living as a platform in general. If it's something you're not familiar with, do follow these links and take a look at the page Natalie's talking about regarding exercise and activity. But it's a pretty comprehensive platform that hones in on different life stages and the most common concerns, challenges, questions, needs that people affected by bleeding disorders have during those life stages. So it's a very thoughtful and well-organized platform. So follow the links and click around. You might be surprised by how robust it is. 6-year-old comic book fan Max Levy was dubbed Iron Max early last year when the moniker that he adopted to help him understand the port he needed for his hemophilia treatment led Marvel Comics to feature the character of Iron Max in one of their comic books, which still is just a crazy thing to say out loud. At the end of 2016, NBC Nightly News, who featured Max and his family when first reporting the story earlier in the year, did a follow-up check-in with them. And in short, Max is doing well, and he says that he's learned a lot from the experience of being nationally recognized as Iron Max. You'll find a short video from NBC Nightly News from that check-in visit in the program notes.
How cute.
Indeed.
NHF is conducting a survey that will help them better support our community members who are 50 years or older in their changing needs. They're asking to know your triumphs and challenges, where you turn for support, and what NHF can do to help you live a longer and stronger life. If you're 50 or older with hemophilia, then please take a few minutes to take the online survey or call 1-800-999-0913 to take it over the phone.
You know, both NHF and NHFA has done this as well at times, have made concerted efforts to reach out to that kind of 50-plus demo. It's a portion of our community that have unique health challenges because of what they experienced through the 80s and 90s and the fact that medicine has just developed so quickly over the last couple of decades. But many of these individuals growing up had very little access to treatment, if any access to treatment. They deal with more joint deformity. And we've also never seen a patient population with hemophilia age on the whole. So a lot of reasons that there's a unique need to learn about this part of our population and ensure that we're meeting those needs as best as possible. However, these are not necessarily your most likely Facebook users or email blast responders or even podcast listeners. So I guess that is to say, if you are hearing this, BloodStream listener, and know somebody with hemophilia who is 50 years or older, make them aware that this survey exists. It's obviously their choice if they want to participate or not, but make them aware that it exists, because I think unlike surveys and some mass communications that are aimed at younger segments of our population, we can't rely on traditional means of outreach to necessarily engage with these community members.
The best way to get your needs met is to share them.
So a reminder, links for everything that we have spoken about here in Trending Topics can be found in the program notes. And I also want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that we talk a lot about what's going on with NHF and HFA. They are the two leading national patient organizations, so of course that makes sense. But they do have email lists. They have Facebook pages. Your local chapter, your local bleeding disorders patient organization will have an email list, and in most cases a Facebook page or an Instagram account or something that you can be actively engaging with. I highly encourage you to engage with those, because there's a lot of information that comes out all the time. We can only capture a portion of it here, and I want to just do my piece, I guess, from a BloodStream perspective of saying we're never going to be able to capture everything. We're going to try to give you as much as we can in a consolidated period of time. But do utilize the resources that are already out there and regularly updated and distributed, as they are quite valuable. And we will continue to do what we can to make sure that we are providing you what we think are some of the most important things that come out each month.
Up next, in our Like, Share, Comment segment, we'll hear about an oft-forgotten blood disorder, sickle cell disease, from a young woman who has it. She'll give us a window into what sickle cell disease is, how it's treated and managed, and what it's like to live with. We'll explore some of the benefits of mindful meditation as it relates to pain and pain management, and we'll discuss the recent announcement of a documentary being produced about a mountaineer with hemophilia summiting Mount Everest later this year. A documentary produced and directed by BloodStream's co-host, Patrick James Lynch. We'll discuss it all. Plus, Patrick talks with Josh Gordy about football and finance during the sit-down segment. All that's coming up, but first, a quick word from one of our sponsors.
Shire's enduring commitment to the bleeding disorders community started over 60 years ago. This deep-rooted focus on research and innovation resulted in the first commercially available recombinant factor VIII treatment, the first recombinant factor VIII treatment free of blood-based additives, and the first recombinant treatment for adults with von Willebrand disease. Shire is passionate about people with bleeding disorders. Shire's vision is to empower you to live life your way. Learn more at bleedingdisorders.com. All right, and kicking off our like, share, comment segment for January, we have Natalie presenting a story on mindful meditation and pain management. Natalie?
Last month, the Chicago Daily Herald released an article on how meditation may help alleviate chronic pain.
So, sorry to interrupt you so early. Is that a new idea?
No. While for a while experts have understood that meditation helps alleviate pain, this article actually goes in depth of how it actually works in the brain.
I see. I got you. Okay.
It's been understood for a while that meditation causes an increase in natural painkillers called endorphins, and that endorphins affect the perception of pain. This led researchers to conduct a study to better understand if meditation provided additional pain relief when used in conjunction with narcotics, or if it essentially competed with those available morphine receptors.
Okay, so let me just see if I understand. So the study was trying to examine, are narcotics and meditation essentially trying to activate the same parts of the brain and therefore having the same benefit, and to do both would be redundant? Or does meditation, in the way that meditation alleviates pain, is that a separate process from what narcotics is able to accomplish? Is that kind of the general gist?
That's exactly the question that the researchers had that led them to this study.
All right, I'm following along. Feeling good about my comprehension today.
The study published in the Journal of Neuroscience in 2016 examined the mechanics of meditation. The study demonstrated that pain-relieving benefits of meditation are not mediated by the endorphins like previously assumed. In the study, patients were introduced to mindful meditation. In the presence of uncomfortable stimulation, the group that was meditating had a significant reduction in pain compared to placebo.
Okay, so that establishes that the mindful meditation is working.
Yes, that mindful meditation does reduce pain.
Got it.
And then in another group, using meditation with morphine receptor blocking and endorphin blocking medication showed the same level of pain reduction as the meditation-only group.
Okay, so that suggests that narcotics and meditation basically doing the exact same thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's getting interesting.
The data indicated that the pain-relieving effects of meditation are not dependent on the production of endorphin compounds. The data also suggested that meditation can be used in conjunction with narcotics because the mechanism of action is different.
Okay, so unpack that for me a little bit. What does that mean?
It basically means that previously understood it was that meditation produced endorphins and that it was those endorphins that reduced pain.
Gotcha.
But after this study, they realized that although meditation does produce endorphins, it's not those endorphins that are helping with the pain management, that something else is happening in the brain altogether. Upon further study, the effect of meditation seems to directly alter the brain's perception of pain rather than suppressing the sensation like narcotics do.
That's interesting. So narcotics block the perception of pain, but meditation, this suggests, is actually altering the way that the brain interacts with pain.
Correct.
That's heavy. Okay.
Yeah, and super cool. The brain's amazing. Many other studies have suggested that meditation directly changes how the brain functions. These studies suggest that regular meditation actually may reshape the very structure of the brain.
That's incredible.
For those in chronic pain, this could mean that meditation changes how the brain interprets the pain signal. As reported in the Journal of Science in 2012, the annual medical costs associated with chronic pain exceeded $600 billion.
That's billion with a B?
That's billion with a B. It's astounding that this is more than the annual cost of treating cancer, heart disease, and diabetes combined. Overall, meditation seems to be an extremely cost-effective therapy for the treatment of chronic pain.
Yeah, I'll say. We definitely need to dig into that 600 billion one way or another. So I guess that leads to a very natural question. If you've never done it before, how does one start mindfulness meditation?
So now more than ever, there are so many resources available online. There's a really cool app that I checked out last week called Headspace. It's fun, it's interactive, it encourages you to keep coming back every day. Plus the guide has a great British accent, making his voice lovely to listen to while meditating. If you want to get involved in a community, and if that helps you stick to a routine, there are meditation classes offered at yoga studios, in some cities just meditation centers that you could attend. I found this helpful when I started meditating, as it forced me to carve out time to actually go, and having the community helped solidify my routine.
And it's worth mentioning at this point, too, once again, we'll have links to some resources that might be of interest in the program notes. But also, while Natalie and I are informed individuals and we're taking this stuff from articles and studies, before making any big health choice, do consult your, go-to care team people or whoever it is you talk to before making healthcare decisions. Don't just take our word for it. Do the homework and make sure that this sounds like something that might be right for you. But this is encouraging. This is seems like an interesting revelation in understanding the true benefits of meditation and how pain and the brain interact with each other. It looks like we're making some interesting progress and better understanding it. Yeah,
it's exciting that they're spending money to research this stuff because, as you can see, $600 billion spent for chronic pain. If there's a cost-effective or free way, insurance companies would probably be very interested in this.
Yeah, and also if it's something that you don't need to have a prescription for, you don't need to go to the pharmacy for, you don't need to pay for, you don't even need to go anywhere. You can meditate from your bedroom or your living room or the toilet. You can meditate anywhere, so... Not recommending any one of those places over another, but, just throwing out some options.
I meditate in the shower sometimes. It's lovely.
And for today's Share piece, we have a contribution from somebody named Delisa O'Brien. Delisa O'Brien is a writer and videographer currently living in Newark, New Jersey. And we asked Delisa if she would contribute a piece on what it is like to live with sickle cell disease. What is sickle cell disease? Who has it? How common is it? And what's the patient experience like? So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to this previously recorded piece from Miss Delisa O'Brien.
Sickle cell disease is a hereditary blood disorder that causes red blood cells, usually circular shaped, to mutate into a sickle or crescent shape. Usually, healthy red blood cells help carry oxygen all over your body thanks to a protein called hemoglobin. People with normal hemoglobin have red blood cells that are round and smooth so the oxygen molecules can easily attach to them. With sickle cell disease, the carrier has a genetically inherited mutation to their hemoglobin, and the body starts producing red blood cells that are mutated and rigid, so the oxygen molecules can no longer attach to them. These sickled cells become stuck in blood vessels, causing a crisis of pain in various parts of the body. They can also lead to fevers, swelling, and in more severe cases, things like a stroke or osteonecrosis, bone death. Patients often make trips to the hospital to receive narcotics to ease the pain or antibiotics to treat infections. Sickle cell disease affects roughly 100,000 Americans, and approximately 2.5 million Americans carry the trait that can cause sickle cell disease. According to the Mayo Clinic, the gene is more common in families that come from Africa, India, Mediterranean countries, the Caribbean islands, South and Central America. In the United States, it most commonly affects blacks. The Center for Disease Control cites that sickle cell disease occurs in about 1 out of every 500 black births and about 1 out of every 36,000 Hispanic American births, making it one of the most common blood disorders in the United States. Most people aren't diagnosed until birth, but there have been initiatives, primarily in the black community, for people to, quote, know your sickle status, or simply be aware of if they are a carrier of the mutation, so as to hopefully reduce the chance of passing it on to their children. The closest thing to a potential cure for sickle cell disease are risky bone marrow transplants, if the patient can find a matching donor. Many patients, however, end up on a chronic blood transfusion program, manually introducing healthy red blood cells into the body. Unfortunately, this treatment plan also introduces the problem of iron overload in the patient's body, which can have adverse effects on vital organs such as the liver and heart. But additional treatments are introduced to combat this problem. An alternative to blood transfusion is the prescription drug hydroxyurea, which aims to increase the patient's fetal hemoglobin, a healthy form of hemoglobin that we all stop producing after birth. The drug was only introduced as a treatment for sickle cell disease in 1998, and those who are on the drug are closely monitored for changes in their blood count to avoid decreased immunity and other complications. Recently, at the 2016 American Society of Hematology's annual meeting, studies for Cell-G1, an antibody drug that targets a molecule known for blocking normal blood flow, has shown positive results for reducing the number of pain crises in sickle cell patients. This study comes at a pivotal time when discussions about opioid usage and abuses have been heavily covered in the media, and patients with sickle cell disease sometimes experience stigma due to their frequent visits to emergency rooms in search of strong narcotics to treat their pain crises. Beyond medical treatment, carriers are urged to stay hydrated, warm, and well-rested. Things like dehydration and overexertion can cause vein constriction, which leads to severe pain crises and complications that result in hospitalization. Self-care is a lifetime learning curve, similar to what many people with hemophilia and other bleeding disorders experience, especially as patients transition from pediatric to adult care and must learn personal limitations while pursuing their independence. Despite the supportive treatments in place to help patients have a better quality of life, the average life expectancy for people with sickle cell disease is between 40 to 60 years of age. However, that average continues to rise as patients are more closely monitored, adhere to their individual treatment regimens, and take personal responsibility for their bodies. For me personally, living with sickle cell disease has been as much of a mental battle as it has been a physical one. I've wasted a lot of time feeling upset for not being quote-unquote normal and apologizing for my illness. But as an adult, I've accepted that this is a part of me, like my introversion, and rather than fight it, I'm learning to understand it. In recent years, I have been focusing on diet and nutrition as a supplement to my hydroxyurea regimen, and I'm trying to incorporate things like yoga, walking, and some gym activity into my regular schedule. In turn, the extra care I've taken to prepare my meals and constantly drink water has actually influenced the people around me. Seeing that I could cause a positive change in other people's dietary habits has inspired me to consider a nutrition education on a more professional level and become a resource to the underserved blood disorder community. You can follow my journey at thesicklerstable.tumblr.com.
Okay, thank you very much, Delisa, for contributing that piece to our share story on this episode. Natalie, what stood out to you from what Delisa shared?
Her dedication to self-care certainly stood out to me. She seems like her biggest advocate. And that journey to that point was not easy, that she was not always her biggest advocate, and that she now is inspiring other people through her meal preparation, through attending yoga and drinking water. I mean, that inspires me. I'm not a water drinker, so even just hearing that, it's like, oh, I haven't even consumed any glasses of water today. You know, I'm not a person with sickle cell, but I'm a person who needs water. So she's inspired me.
Well done, Delisa. I think we forget that sickle cell disease technically is an inherited blood disorder. There is a trend in our community to broaden the awareness to include people with sickle cell disease. And I think this piece from Delisa, for me, crystallizes why, because there's a lot of similarity. You get it in a very similar way genetically as you do hemophilia or von Willebrand disease, and it affects your blood and your blood's ability to function like normal. It's also not lost on me that talking about pain and pain management, that comes on the heels of the meditation story, which is kind of interesting. We have a little bit of a pain theme going through the like, share, comment segment this month, I suppose. So anyway, thank you again to Delisa for contributing that story. And as she said, you can follow her journey at thesicklerstable.tumblr.com. And finally, in our comment segment for this episode, as we mentioned earlier, hemophiliac mountaineer Chris Bombardier is climbing Mount Everest later this year, and Believe Limited, my company, is responsible for producing a documentary about this that I am directing. Right, Natalie, this is a little bit of inside dealing here.
But it's very exciting and a very interesting story. So I give you a pass on this one.
I appreciate that very much. But I wouldn't be bringing this up if it wasn't as highly responded to, not anticipated necessarily, but I haven't seen something else in bleeding disorders have 180 shares of a post on Facebook. Like, that's amazing for the size of our community. I've literally never seen that. So people are responding to the announcement that Chris made just a couple of weeks ago. To give you a little bit of background, Chris was a high school and college athlete with severe hemophilia B, who after college found that he was missing that outlet to explore the limits of his physicality, and he found mountaineering. Fast forward a few years, and Chris decided that he wanted to climb the 7 summits, which is the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. And as of today, he has climbed 5 of those 7 summits. Everest this year will be the 6th, and it is the tallest. Last year at HFA's symposium in Vegas, Chris and I sat down, and it was the first time that he told me that this is what he was doing this year, and that he would ideally like to be able to capture it for a documentary. And not just capture his climb for the purposes of celebrating his historic achievement, which is incredible. A guy with severe hemophilia B is about to climb Mount Everest. Just think about that for a second. But Chris is also a board member of Save One Life. They are, like the World Federation, doing work to help in the developing countries around the world. So that's been a big part of Chris's life and Chris's mission for a while, and he wants to use this documentary to profile the community in Nepal as an example of what life is like for community in the developing world. So there is quite a story to be told about a guy from America who has access to care his whole life and is enabled to climb the highest mountain in the world that sits in a country for whom hemophilia is frankly all but a death sentence. That's a very captivating story, I think, and I guess that's why I'm directing a documentary about it. So we started rolling cameras in Denver in December. We have a couple little shoots in the next about 8 weeks or so. At the end of March, the team heads over to Kathmandu to start the trek to base camp, which is kind of crazy. I have to say, I'm not going to base camp with Chris, but Rob Bradford, Believe's lead producer and one of our shooters, one of our camera guys, he is actually going to be following Chris and Chris's wife Jess and Lori Kelly, founder of Save One Life, to base camp and spending the duration of these several weeks Chris will be on Mount Everest at base camp collecting footage and delivering it to us back in the States. So we'll be thinking of Rob from afar for quite some time. So that's kind of it. That's a little bit of background on this this big story that I'm very, very proud to be a part of, and we will continue to be submitting updates through Chris's webpage, and before long, the documentary, which it'll have its own Facebook and social media presence soon enough. But in the meantime, you can follow Chris's Adventures of a Hemophiliac Facebook page for more updates on the project.
What would training for an event like this even look like?
That's a good question. So I got a little bit of an insight into that toward the end of December. A few of us started principal production in Denver. Got to see some of Chris's training. It's a lot of cardio and a lot of core strength. That's what I've kind of put together thus far. Doing what you have to do to climb a mountain at that altitude is particularly challenging. And one of the things that I found really neat and comforting, no one doubts Chris's work ethic and responsibility. So, immediately when you hear about mountaineers and danger and some of the scarier aspects of this, Chris's mom says, with Chris, you don't have to worry about that. There's a lot of accidents that happen as a result of some kind of unnecessary risk or not bringing the right equipment or not being adequately prepared for something. And with Chris, that's not a concern anyone has, which gives me a lot of comfort because it's still an incredibly... it is what it is. It's climbing Mount Everest.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, it is intense. It's climbing a mountain. It's like the craziest thing you can do.
One of those freak accidents, sort of just slipped on the turf, and here I am today.
My conversation with Josh Gordy is next. Right after this, a word from one of our sponsors. Attending summer camp or family camp is a major opportunity for a young person with a bleeding disorder. It's a time to meet new friends, to get out of your comfort zone and try new things, and for many people with hemophilia, it's where you first learn to self-infuse. Camp is a big deal in the bleeding disorders community, which is why Season 6 of Stop the Bleeding takes place entirely at a fictional summer camp for people with bleeding disorders called Camp I Don't Wanna Bleed. Throughout the 8-episode season, the show touches upon themes such as inclusion versus isolation, the importance of challenge by choice, and the growing awareness of women with bleeding disorders and their unique needs. The season may or may not also include a friendly woods monster. I can neither confirm nor deny. You'll have to see for yourself by visiting stbhemo.com. That's S for Samurai, T for Turntable, and B for Benicio del Toro. Visit stbhemo.com. The Jacksonville Jaguars, Green Bay Packers, St. Louis Rams, Indianapolis Colts, and New York Giants fill out the NFL resume of cornerback Josh Gordy, which did include a 2010 Super Bowl championship with the Green Bay Packers. On this episode's sit-down segment, you're going to hear 5 important financial tips from Josh to help improve your financial portfolio and financial mindset as we enter 2017, new year, new you. And in case you don't know, the reason that Josh is someone of interest to our community is because in addition to those impressive credits, he is also the uncle to a young boy with severe hemophilia and an inhibitor, and for the last number of years has been doing work to support the hemophilia community through a foundation he started called the Hope Foundation, granting scholarships to college-bound students affected by bleeding disorders. So without further ado, my conversation with Josh Gordy. Josh, thanks a lot for being available today.
My pleasure. Even through all the obstacles, we made it in.
I know, we did. Good start to the 2017 season. So speaking of seasons, you are an NFL Super Bowl champion, which is one of the most incredible titles a human being can have. Does that ever get old, by the way?
You know what? It doesn't, because I mean, I guess you realize the magnitude of it and love hearing it, love saying it, and it's definitely one I can hold on forever.
And you've been studying finance the last couple of years, which is something that people who are familiar with you might not realize, and that according to your LinkedIn profile are a financial coach and a success coach. So tell me and tell the listeners here a little bit about what that all means and how you got involved in pursuing finance in such an elevated way.
Once you make it to get to that rank of professional football, you are faced with financial challenges. You hear all the horror stories of guys leaving the game and just blowing all the money and going broke after a couple of years. And I just didn't want that to be me, so I really made it my point to really dig into the personal finance side of things. It's not at all complicated. There's nothing that has to be complicated about it. It's just about, learning your behaviors and how you should treat money and how you should view money, I should say. And during my time, in the NFL, I, employed the services of having a financial coach on my side, actually showing me, the proper ways to budget, how much I should be putting aside for retirement, emergency funds, good things, stuff like that. Because as we all know, the game will end one day and you got to continue on with your life. That was one main reason I decided to pursue it. And from there, just took interest in, really being a financial coach. My mom, she came to me one day, I think this is something you could probably enjoy doing once you're, done playing. So I was like, hey, I'll look into it.
Good old mom's always looking for that stable path forward, right?
Exactly. So
hearing you talk about the players making mistakes, a quick Google search here says that the average NFL salary $1.9 million a year, and if your average player is not necessarily making 1.9, and the average career is only something like 3 years, so that's not a decent amount of money, but it's also not what I think people often think about. So, what were some of the common mistakes you were seeing?
Yeah, that was a good point you made there, saying that a lot of people, the perception that people have, on the type of money that we make as professional athletes. I think the number one mistake is, you get into the league and you're overly excited and you start seeing what the older guys are doing. I think that's the biggest one. You try to do what that 6-year veteran guy is doing, or they're at a different level now. They played for 6, 7, 8 years, so they have a different level of comfort, I guess, when it comes to their financial picture. They go by.
Is there pressure in the locker room too? Like, are guys in the locker room? Is there a little bit of kind of cultural pressure to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak?
I think it is, man, to be honest. But my first year in the league, I said, you know what, I'm going to treat this just like I'm still in college.
It sounds like you've always had a certain amount of smarts when it comes to money and money management. But in the last number of years, having gotten this certification and kind of deep diving it from a professional standpoint, are there a few tips that you could share with people that the average individual should really be thinking about as, we're at the beginning of a new year, so I feel like it's a good time. People are motivated to make some changes in their lives.
What are some tips that you could give people on how to better manage their money?
I like to tell people, imagine what your retirement will be like. How do you see yourself in those years? Do you want to be still having to work because you have to, or are you working because it's just something that you want to do?
Right.
Something, do with your day. So I think that would be the number one thing is, setting goals. Number two, when I do sit down with clients, this is the first thing once we start getting into numbers that we actually tackle, and that's doing a budget. A lot of times when people hear that word budget, it's sort of a scary word. I try to get them to think in a different direction. A budget is nothing more than telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. Don't think about it as being restricted, but more so as having freedom. If you know your financial picture is not exactly where you want it to be, and you're in the store shopping, or you may want to go pick up, some clothes that you've been eyeing or whatever, you can get to the counter and, you're thinking in the back of your head like, oh man, should I be buying this? But on the flip side, if you have a budget in place and at the beginning of the month, you've already allocated money, for your mortgage, your rent, whatever, utilities. Hey, if you have some money and you're spending your discretionary category, then once you do go do that shopping that you want to do, you know that you've already got everything else taken care of for the month, and this is my money that I can enjoy. Along with constructing the budget is actually doing it. The third tip I like to, give out is, just reducing your debt or eliminating the debt altogether. Once you get to talking about building wealth and passing out money to the next generation, if you can reduce the debt payments that you're making out of the house every month, that's more that you can keep. Now that's more money that we can work with to help build our legacy. The fourth point I would say, which is probably the biggest behind having a budget, is having an emergency fund. A lot of people get into trouble right here because they don't have an emergency fund in place. Something goes wrong in their life. Funny story, I had a blowout a couple weeks ago, actually. I always use that as a scenario, and it happened to me. If you had an emergency fund in place, boom, if a tire blowout, okay, cool. I call my insurance company, let them know what happens. Maybe they send somebody to help. But all at the same time, it wasn't anything that was stressful financial-wise because I knew I had that emergency fund sitting to the side for these situations.
When you have the emergency plan, the emergency fund in place, there's a protocol, you can get through it, and it doesn't become this huge weight that kind of ruins your day, ruins your week, ruins your months.
Exactly.
But if you don't have that plan in place, then you're scrambling, and, it's going to affect other aspects of your life. We talk about that too. I'm sure in your family it's come up with regard to hemophilia. What I have in my fridge and my place now, and I didn't always, but I have my little emergency package that has my medicine, syringes, needles, alcohol swabs, tourniquets, so that if something happens and I got to go and be out the door to the hospital, I'm not in a stressful situation trying to put everything together. That's already done. I know I just got to grab and go. It's the same principle.
And now that you mentioned that, I thought about how Nolan, they got a whole closet full of supplies and everything. So that's actually a great example, great correlation right there.
Let's tie the worlds together. All right, so we got setting goals. We got making a budget. We've got reducing or eliminating debt entirely. We've got having an emergency fund, an emergency plan in place. And then what's that number 5?
Start retirement savings early. If you start early, man, you just put away something every month. From when you're in your 20s or 30s or whatever, you'd be surprised that, as to how it grows by the time you reach retirement age. And, even Einstein said that, compound interest is like the eighth wonder of the world. It's truly a magical thing.
And I want to just spend a brief moment too talking about that idea of compound interest. And I can, if people are listening, that's also, I think, something that can sound scary and just make people want to shut out. But I've only in the last couple of years come to understand a little bit about it and appreciate it. You and I are in a similar, I'm 31, so we're in a similar position in our life where okay, it's really time for me now to understand this. And I want people to be able to understand why compound interest is so important. Can you say a few words about what it is?
I usually have a chart that I show, but it pretty much compares two guys. One guy started when he was 19, but only contributed for 10 years or so, say. But then his friends saw how his money was growing, but he didn't start until he was 25 years old. And he put in from 25 to 65 for 40 years. But just because he started later and the other guy started earlier, the guy who started earlier, even though he put in 10 years, his money actually grew more than the guy who put it in for 40. Just because it's that concept of, the earlier you can get it started, the more time you have. And with compound interest, it's more so about time, not really about the amount of money you dump in. Like a lot of people are like, hey, I can just dump in a lot and, just let it ride. But it's about being consistent and really contributing every month. So you put in $100 into a good mutual fund or whatever, and it grows by a certain interest, a certain percentage point. At the end of that cycle, that's how much it's worth now. But beginning on the next cycle, the next month, now the percentage calculates off of that last total. So instead of calculating off of $100, now it may be calculating off of $120. It's definitely about starting early and being consistent.
Starting early and being consistent. That's good. Overarching principles.
That's it.
You mentioned when you do live presentations, give us a little window into how you're applying them.
Okay, so, the bulk of my clients, to be honest, come through a referral process, a referral service, say. It's definitely an array of people. It's all over the board, and it's more so about just showing them hope, because a lot of people they're scared, honestly. And we as coaches, a lot of times it doesn't have to be about the numbers. It's just about, reassuring them that, hey, let's really work on this plan, and, it's not as bad as you think. So, and just easing there, putting them at ease, I think is the most fulfilling part of it from my end, I would say.
And how people who are hearing this, who might be interested in engaging with you as a coach, how can people go about contacting you?
I know we probably have listeners all over the country, so the number one way would be to, I would say, go to Dave Ramsey's website, and from there you'll find a link for a local coach in your area. Because a lot of people, let's face it, they like to be face-to-face with someone. So, me traveling to California, that may not be feasible nor cost-effective. So, definitely I think that would be the first thing is, just look for someone in your area. I do have my own website, freedomfinancialcoaching.com, LinkedIn, as you said, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Coach Gordy. That's what a lot of my clients like to call me, is Coach Gordy. So I incorporated some of the athletics world into my financial coaching. So when we put together a plan and getting the budget together, I put everything together in a nice packet. I call it the playbook. Your playbook for your financial future.
I see what you're doing there. I see how this works.
Exactly.
For over 60 years, Shire has been committed to improving the lives and health of people with bleeding disorders through partnering with the community and leading investments in research. They offer a vast array of live event programs and resources, many of which are available in both English and Spanish. Shire is passionate about people with bleeding disorders. Shire's vision is to empower you to live life your way. To learn more and to find a live event near you, visit bleedingdisorders.com. Once again, this episode of BloodStream is brought to you by Stop the Bleeding. Now, I accept you've been busy listening to everything we have to say here on BloodStream and you haven't had a chance to go to stbhemo.com yet. That's fine, you're still hanging out with us, we understand that. But once you are done with BloodStream today, head over to stbhemo.com to check out the hilarious and award-winning comedic web series about bleeding disorders. And in just a couple of weeks, we will be releasing our most recent season, Season 6, all 8 episodes entirely in Spanish as well. So head over to stbhemo.com to check out what my mom calls her favorite web series.
Speaking of football, though, I do want to kind of go back to that for a second. So now you even have the title now of Coach Gordy. You did not play this past season. Are you a retired athlete, or are we still thinking maybe we make a comeback?
You know what? Sometimes those decisions are sort of made for you. They sent me a letter in the mail saying that since it's been a full calendar year since you last played, we'll be sending you your severance check. So I did receive that, and I guess it's kind of like an unofficial retirement type deal, but it's still, it's always if for whatever reason, you do get called back in, you can always, reinstate yourself. But, at this time, I think I can say that, I'm 90% retired, put it like that.
You keep yourself, I guess, you just kind of keep training and keep working out, and if that phone call comes, great, but in the meantime, You've got this thing lined up. Your life is moving forward.
Just working out is, I mean, it's been a part of my life for 20 years, but I can't just stop it. I mean, that's something I'm going to do regardless. But yeah, financial coaching has definitely, helped fill my void of my day. I mean, honestly, when I first stopped playing, it was tough. You sit there and you think like, man, what am I doing? The last 20 years, that's what I've been doing is playing football, but it definitely was a not trying time, but confusing. Like, man, like what is next, But that can also stem back to what I talked about on the financial side. Hey, I had this certain amount of money set aside for this situation because, like I said, everybody knows they're not going to play forever. So it gives you some cushion to, keep living, but at the same time gives you time to figure it out instead of having to go out and just take the first thing that's available. So financial coaching has been very, pretty rewarding thus far and definitely looking to keep growing.
And I imagine you've gotten more time in with the family in the last year than probably the last number of years before that.
Man, that's huge. I tell people all the time, they ask like, man, do you want to go coach? Do you want to go coach? I'm like, I don't know, man. My kids are 3 and 1 years old. Like, just being in football, you see a lot of these coaches, they put in ridiculous hours and they family make sacrifices. Some deal with it and some can't. And I just feel like my kids being this young, I don't want to miss anything. I heard another guy say this weekend, he actually retired. I guess we all know him. Steve Smith Sr. retired from Baltimore. He's played 14 years, but in his final speech, he was saying, I have a kid now who's going to college. I have one who's a junior in high school, and I have another one who's 2 years old. He was saying, I've missed a lot of time, and I'm tired of doing that. And I want to make sure I'm there to see everything from here on out, and especially for his 2-year-old. So that really hit home to me when he said it. I could really relate.
So now to kind of wrap us up, talking a little bit about the hemophilia and bleeding disorders community. You've done a couple different events. You've started your own nonprofit organization that gives scholarships to college-bound students who have a bleeding disorder. What does your ongoing interaction with the greater community look like in this 85% retired point in your life?
Man, definitely want to always try to bring as much awareness and as much as I can. Always looking to grow the nonprofit. It's not as easy as you always think. Definitely always looking to, grow that on a larger scale as well. Do things outside of just the scholarships. And I recently, partnered up with the Healthy Steps program, really trying to get the initiative off the ground with the importance of physical fitness. So that's very exciting. It was a great time up in New York. We had a good time filming all the videos. And like I said, just hope it catches on and become a staple in the bleeding disorder community. I would say that'd be the biggest thing that looking forward to going forward.
Well, we on behalf of BloodStream, thank you for doing this today, and consider yourself someone with an open invitation anytime. If you want to share something on the podcast, just let me know and we will set it up.
I will.
Thank you again to Josh for appearing on this episode of BloodStream. Natalie, give me some key takeaways. What did you pull from that conversation with Josh?
What I thought was interesting when he talked about budgeting and how budgeting is more controlling where your money goes than looking back wondering where it went. That certainly hit home with me because when you think about doing a budget, it can sometimes feel overwhelming or restricting, and it's more of just understanding where things go and what amount should be allocated towards what, and really taking control of your money. And I think that was really well put.
Yeah, and it reminds me of what we talk about in the creative world too, where there's freedom in the boundaries, and the fact, his website is Freedom Financial Coaching, and I think he says it explicitly in there that when you have a budget, there's freedom because you know where you stand. If you have money in that discretionary fund and you see the thing you want to buy, you know whether or not you can. You have the freedom to make the choice as opposed to never quite knowing where you stand, which can feel like freedom, but it's really not.
No, it's anxiety inducing. I think, yeah, like you said, freedom within boundaries. Taking the time, doing the upfront work of setting a budget is great.
Agreed. For me, what I find interesting and humbling is when you hear, again, and not to overstate it, but Super Bowl champion, like that is the pinnacle of sports. And the number of people who compete in football and ever get to have that title. So few. But the fact that from very early on, he was aware of the mistakes that other athletes could and did make around him and started planning how he would have a future after football, and now being in a position to help others with that. It's just a reminder that the road ahead is always longer than, for me, sometimes I'd like to think. And it's always important to be cognizant of that when making any kind of decision, but in this case, specifically a financial one. If an NFL Super Bowl champion is smart enough to realize, hey, you got to be smart with how you kind of figure out finances across a lifetime, that's true of all of us. And not that I don't think about that, but there's just something really nice about hearing it from someone who, I view as being in a whole another stratosphere when it comes to that kind of consideration. He's not, though. He's just another human being trying to figure it out and make it work. And it's cool to hear him speak from that perspective, and it makes it really relatable. And it makes me feel like, all right, yeah, then I guess I need to be spending a little more time paying attention to that stuff too. So thank you, Josh, for lending your perspective. And you can find links to Josh's Facebook page, LinkedIn, and his Freedom Financial Coaching website in the program notes. And now for our final segment of the episode, Parting Shots. It's a brand new segment. It is one non-bleeding disorder related top of mind thing that Natalie and I would like to share with you before we say goodbye. We don't plan these in advance. They are unrehearsed. And Natalie, please offer your parting shot first.
My parting shot would be Obama's speech, that farewell speech. Whether you like him or you don't like him, it was very, very beautiful to watch, and he's an impressive orator, and you should take the time to watch it.
Kind of on the other side of the coin, my parting shot for this episode is a reminder that while there are all kinds of things that are important, and in the bleeding disorders community, when we talk about medicine and advocacy and access and things like politics and the election and healthcare changes, all of this is very important. But I am constantly reminded how important it is to have those things that help us escape and not simply ruminate on these anxiety-inducing, important things in our lives. And for me, the NBA is an amazing escape. It's another exciting NBA season, and even if it's just looking at a score or in the rare event I get to actually see a game, I'm always reminded how much I enjoy the ability to unplug and distance myself just for a little while from the things that consume most of my time. And I suppose my parting shot is to help remind everybody to keep indulging in those things that keep you grounded, keep you happy, and keep you healthy.
I like hearing you say that.
And that is all for this episode. Reminder that our first Ask the Expert episode featuring a HTC hematologist answering listener-submitted questions will air on Monday, January 30th. Submit your questions for this episode to mailbag@bloodstreampod.com by Thursday, January 19th. You can subscribe to Bloodstream on iTunes, where you can also leave us a very helpful review. You'll also find Bloodstream on Stitcher, TuneIn, or wherever it is that you are listening right now. Get in touch with Bloodstream by our email address, mailbag@bloodstreampod.com. You can also find us on Facebook, facebook.com/bloodstreampod, or connect with us on Twitter @bloodstreaminfo. This episode of Bloodstream was written by Patrick James Lynch, Natalie DeLillo, and Delisa O'Brien, and edited by Ryan Gielen. Produced by Patrick James Lynch, Ryan Gielen, Rob Bradford, Andrew Gall, Josh Bragg, and Avra Friedman. And the Bloodstream podcast is edited, as always, by Mr. Andrew Gall. Special thanks to everyone at Believe Limited, the National Hemophilia Foundation, our presenting sponsor Stop the Bleeding, our supporting sponsor Shire, and the Hemophilia Alliance. Reminder to check out the program notes for this episode in your podcast player of choice or on bloodstreampod.com for all the links and additional information about the various stories featured on this episode. My name is Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm Natalie DeLillo.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself.